Hello and welcome. I'm ONeill filling in for Riz Khan. It's been 6 years since the 9/11 attacks, and the events on that day still generate fierce debate in newspapers, on the airwaves, and in dozens of books that have been published since. A book by author and journalist Wright lays out in painstaking detail the people and the events that led to that fateful day in 2001. Looming Tar looks at the road to 9/11 through the lives of four key players. It reveals hitherto unknown facts about people like Osama bin Laden and the rivalry between United States law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Don't forget, we take your questions on the show. The numbers are there right at the bottom of your screen. Wright joins me now from New York. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I've looked at the book, I've read it, and it goes into painstaking detail. It tells us about the people and the events that led to 9/11. I was just wondering if you could tell us, when did the idea for this book first occur to you?
Well, right after 9/11, I knew I'd have to write something. I didn't know what. So I started off by writing about victims of the tragedy. Right away, though, I began to look for a way to humanize this vast tragedy. I was scanning the obituaries that were coming online then by the hundreds, and I found on the Washington Post site an obituary for John ONeill, who had been the head of the FBI's counterterrorism division in New York and had died on 9/11. And I decided that his tragedy would at least be a beginning point for me. And then after that, I decided I would write also about Ayman al-Zawahiri, Osama bin Laden, and eventually Prince Turki alFaisal. Their four lives interweave in the narrative and tell the story of why al-Qaeda arose and what we failed to do to stop it.
Well, in your book, you identify some key elements or some key developments that ultimately led to the creation of al-Qaeda and effectively to the organization's declaration of war against the United States. You mentioned things like the 1967 war between Israel and Arab nations,
Right.
The rise of Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran, in fact, the Iranian Revolution, the assassination of Anwar Sadat, and the growing relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States. So looking at it that way, the ideology that drives al-Qaeda actually came about long before the 90s or the 80s.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The rise of the Islamist trend, going back even to the beginning of the Muslim Brothers in the middle 20s, has a long history. And the book actually opens with Sayyid Qutb, the Islamist philosopher, coming to America in 1948. And finding himself radicalized by his experience in America at a time when America's reputation in the world, and especially the Arab world, was at a real high. So it's a paradoxical fact, but that is really where, in many ways, the Islamist trend began.
You know, as you mentioned at the outset of the interview, that you tell the story of 9/11 through the lives of four people. Now, two of the people I think are well known. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who's the deputy to Osama bin Laden, and of course Osama bin Laden himself. But you also tell the story through the former head of Saudi intelligence, Faisal al-Turki, and John ONeill. I want to come to John ONeill in a minute, but how does the former head of Saudi intelligence fit into the story?
When I had the opportunity to first interview Prince Turki alFaisal in Riyadh, I was simply asking him about Osama bin Laden and his relationship. But as more I talked to him, I realized what a fascinating life that he had lived, Prince Turki. He had, grown up in the royal family. He had gone to school with Bill Clinton at Georgetown University in Washington, and he had worked alongside with bin Laden during the jihad against the Soviets. His life was a perfect vehicle for helping the reader understand a side of Saudi and Arab society that I thought no other example could show it quite as well.
And John ONeill, he was the man who led the hunt for bin Laden for a long time.
Right.
He died in 9/11. His death must have been the ultimate irony.
You know, I thought that when I first read about reading his obituary, but I don't see it as ironic any longer. When ONeill was forced out of the FBI and had to take a new job, he got the job as the head of security at the World Trade Center. And friends of his said, "John, you'll be safe now. They've already hit the World Trade Center." And he said, "No, they'll finish the job." So he instinctively placed himself at ground zero. So I don't see it so much as ironic as almost like a Greek tragedy.
You know, when you write about the hunt for bin Laden, he's still on the run. He's been very elusive. He's evaded capture. A lot of the book is devoted to the rivalry between the CIA and the FBI. Could you tell us about that rivalry?
Well, it was tragic because it really prevented America from stopping this horrible attack. These are two cultures. They really hate each other from the very beginning, and they have different purposes in the world. I mean, for the FBI, the reason for them to gather intelligence is to use it as evidence in a trial that will convict wrongdoers. The CIA, when intelligence is used in a trial, it's no longer useful to them at all because it's well known. It's no longer secret. What they want intelligence for is to anticipate future actions. So essentially their missions are contradictory. Plus there are these long-standing bureaucratic turf wars that have been very difficult to bridge even after 9/11. And so you have personalities like John ONeill and at the CIA, Michael Scheuer, who really represent the kind of bitter antagonism that these two agencies have long enjoyed and has been ruinous for American intelligence community.
Let me ask you this then. If this rivalry didn't exist, if there was no turf war between the CIA and the FBI, could 9/11 have been prevented?
Yes, of course it could have been. It's a horrible, horrible story to recount, but the CIA knew about the presence of al-Qaeda in America. In January of 2000, 2 members of al-Qaeda flew from Malaysia to Los Angeles and then went to San Diego. In March of 2000, the CIA learned of their presence in America. This is, 19 months before 9/11. On 3 different occasions, the FBI formally queried the CIA about these guys who had been in this meeting that the FBI was investigating in Malaysia. And each of those 3 occasions, the CIA refused to respond to the FBI. Had they done so, the FBI had all the legal authority it needed to follow these guys, to clone their computers, to eavesdrop on their telephone calls. It didn't have to break any laws at all. They had everything they needed except the knowledge that al-Qaeda was actually in America, and the CIA prevented them from knowing that.
Okay, Lawrence, let's get a call in. We have a caller from Saudi Arabia, Sultan from Saudi Arabia. Go ahead with your question.
The incident happened in 9/11, sir.
Yes.
It should not have happened, but after this, so many people have written so many books, and I think they are making money only.
Well, I think that's just a comment there.
Yeah. Well, I'm very happy to say that my book has been successful, and better that than the opposite.
The book itself, you put a lot of research into that. How did you go about researching the information for the book?
Well, I traveled to a dozen different countries, and some of them many times. For instance, Saudi Arabia, I was there for on 3 different occasions. Spoke to more than 600 people. The Saudis, as a matter of fact, when I made application to go there as a journalist, for nearly a year and a half they wouldn't let me in, and finally I realized they would never let me in as a reporter, so I took a job. I became an expat worker in Saudi Arabia, mentoring young reporters at this newspaper in Jeddah, which was Osama bin Laden's hometown. So it was the best piece of bad luck, as it turned out, because instead of being a reporter in a hotel room, making phone calls, trying to get appointments, I had an apartment, I had a job, I had a car, I had to go to work every day, and I had all these young reporters that were helping me understand their society in a way that I could never hope to do just as a reporter.
And in the course of that research, did you meet members of al-Qaeda?
I met members who had been in al-Qaeda who probably weren't affiliated with it now. And I met members of the bin Laden family and people that were close to bin Laden, and also people who had been in Zawahiri's group, not in Saudi Arabia, but in Egypt and London. So I met people that were tied into those groups.
We have another caller on the line. This is Shatia from Pakistan. Go ahead with your question.
I'd like to first just make a comment that I think Al Jazeera is doing a brilliant job because we've just seen the whole transformation of getting proper information. And number two, I think the author, this one and others like him who are writing on topics of this nature, are doing a service to the whole country and to the whole phenomena that's going on right now of understanding this whole networks that are existing all over the world. I mean, we're in a global village, and I think I commend him that they have the courage and they have the freedom to go ahead, research, investigate, and then execute books which are now globally available, and I really want to thank people like him for doing this.
Well, thank you, Shazi, for your call.
Well, I'm honored to ever say that, and it was a privilege for me to have the opportunity to write this book, and an education for me as well, to be able to go out into the world and meet people from all different kinds of backgrounds, with many of whom had views that I don't agree with, but at least I had the opportunity to try to understand them.
One of the interesting facts that emerged in your book is how much like a big corporation Al-Qaeda is structured. I mean, I was surprised to learn things like the recruits, the members, actually get healthcare insurance and they get paid vacations.
Well, this was the old Al-Qaeda. Remember, this is before 9/11. This is the business school student, Osama bin Laden, set up a very corporate structure, which was top-down in its management style, but they had free paid vacations, for instance, a month-long vacation, a monthly salary. It was a good job for a lot of these guys. But that Al-Qaeda has been smashed. It's now changed. It's much more horizontal, more loosely organized into affiliates, and it's more like street gangs than it is like the IBM corporation that you described.
When you look at the different tiers of Al-Qaeda, how do you see it structured?
There's still Al-Qaeda proper, Zawahiri and bin Laden, and a small inner core of leaders, probably hiding out in the tribal areas of Pakistan. But beyond that, there are affiliates. There's Al-Qaeda in Iraq, of course, which is the primary effort of Al-Qaeda now. There's Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb in North Africa. There's Al-Qaeda in Saudi Arabia. These are formal affiliates who have formally declared their allegiance to bin Laden. And then there are many different, less well-organized cells that are Al-Qaeda linked or Al-Qaeda wannabes that stretch all across the Muslim world, and also in Europe, and perhaps even in other places in the world, South America and North America. It's deeply rooted now in many countries where it wasn't present at all, and it is sympathetically viewed in many different areas where it was despised right after 9/11.
Okay, let's get another caller in. This is Mujid from Doha.
Yeah, I am calling from Doha, and my comment is that if Western society is able to understand that the primary cause of the rise of Al-Qaeda is due to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and their negligence to address the problem, even the media is not unable to address the problem. Whether your book is able to address that problem properly. See, every time U.S. society is hiding the primary fact that the Arab-Israeli conflict is the primary reason for the hatred towards the West in the Muslim countries. Whether your book is able to address that.
All right, thank you, Majid. Thanks for the call. Lawrence, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, my feeling about that is that the Israeli conflict with the Palestinians is a tremendous source of inflammation in the Muslim world. I would never deny that. I don't think, however, that if it had never occurred or was resolved, that Al-Qaeda would not exist. I think that bin Laden, when he created Al-Qaeda, really was focused on getting the Americans out of the Arabian Peninsula. That was his ostensible political goal. And frankly, he achieved that goal. In March of 2003, when American troops when the Bush administration announced that they were withdrawing from the Arabian Peninsula because they no longer had to enforce the no-fly rule in Iraq. At that point, Al-Qaeda had won its major political goal. But the very next month, they began their attacks on Western housing compounds. Now, if one were able to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict tomorrow, bin Laden would be in tears. He's never attacked Israel except in the most notional way. but it is a tremendous source of recruitment for him. And I do think that the political will of the whole world has to be brought to bear on this subject.
When you look at the events of 9/11, I mean, looking at it 6 years later, and the legacy that it's left, particularly here in America, I mean, one of the legacies that it's left is that there's been an assault, in the view of many, on civil liberties in this country. And something that is very close to home for us is just today we've been talking to an attorney for an Jazeera journalist who is on Guantanamo Bay, who's being held there without trial. What is your feeling on that legacy?
I think that this is one of the greatest tragedies that has happened in our country. You know, next to the attack by Al-Qaeda on America, the greatest loss that we've suffered is the sacrifice of our civil liberties. And it's what really helped us stand apart in this contest, and we're sacrificing the most essential assets of our arsenal. Safety, of course, is something everybody wants, but you never have safety in your hand. You're always reaching for it. But in the process of reaching for safety, we've negotiated away a lot of our liberties that were very hard fought for in the first place, and very difficult to gain back once they've been sacrificed. So I think that we've made a lot of mistakes.
Lawrence,
and it's going to be a long time before we get them back.
I'm going to have to stop there. Thank you very much for joining us. We've run out of time. Thanks for being with us. And now looking ahead to tomorrow's show, we speak with the legendary Egyptian actor Omar Sharif. Don't forget, if you have any thoughts or pressing issues around the world, send us your emails. That's to riz@aljazeera.net. Street Talk is next.